Every religion speaks of an ending. Christians call it the rapture. Muslims call it Yawm al-Qiyamah. Hindus call it the Kali Yuga. Indigenous peoples across the globe speak of a great purification. Thousands of years, thousands of cultures, all pointing toward the same event. What if they're all right? What if the end times aren't a myth, but a memory of something that has happened before, something that is about to happen again, something that those who control this world have known about for centuries while keeping the rest of us blind. The being I followed into the Mojave Desert didn't speak in metaphors. It didn't deal in religious symbolism. It showed me exactly what the end times are, when they will occur, and why every ancient tradition remembers them, even if they've forgotten the details. What I learned will terrify you, not because it's hopeless, because it's imminent. The signs that every prophet described are not future warnings. They are present realities. The countdown has already begun. But here's what the religions don't tell you. The end times are not punishment. They are not divine judgment on a sinful world. They are a cycle, a natural process that this planet undergoes periodically. A reset that has happened before and will happen again. And those who understand the cycle don't have to fear it. They can survive it. If you're ready to understand what the end times really are and why every ancient culture encoded warnings about them, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. Because what Marcus Webb witnessed in that desert didn't just reveal the future. It explained why the past keeps repeating. Now let me tell you how it all began. Marcus Webb was sitting on the hood of his truck, drinking warm beer and watching the sun set over the Mojave, when he saw the light descend from the sky. At 51, this had become his ritual. Drive out to the desert after work, find a spot far from the lights of Barstow, drink until the stars came out and the silence became bearable. It was better than going home to an empty apartment, better than another night scrolling through photos of a life that no longer existed. Marcus had been a geologist for the U.S. Geological Survey for 23 years. He had mapped fault lines, studied volcanic activity, analyzed core samples from every continent. It had been a good career, stable, respected, until he started asking the wrong questions. It began with the ice cores from Greenland, layers of ancient ice that recorded Earth's climate going back hundreds of thousands of years. Marcus had noticed something in the data that his colleagues dismissed, a pattern. Every 12,000 years or so, the records showed massive disruption, temperature spikes, atmospheric anomalies, evidence of catastrophic events that reset everything. The official explanation was gradual climate shifts, natural variation, nothing to be alarmed about. But Marcus had dug deeper. He found the same pattern in sediment cores from the ocean floor, in tree ring data from ancient forests, in geological formations across multiple continents. The evidence pointed to something the scientific establishment refused to acknowledge: cyclical catastrophe, periodic resets that wiped out civilizations and reshaped the planet, events that happened with a regularity that suggested they weren't random at all. When Marcus published his preliminary findings, the reaction was swift and brutal. His funding was cut. His papers were rejected. Colleagues who had respected him for decades suddenly couldn't return his calls. Within a year, he had been reassigned to a desk job processing data he had once collected himself. His wife Linda tried to be supportive, for a while, but watching her husband spiral into obsession, spending every night poring over ancient texts and fringe research, took its toll. "You've become someone I don't recognize," she said the night she left. "The man I married was a scientist. You've turned into a conspiracy theorist." The divorce was finalized 6 months ago. Linda got the house in San Diego. Marcus got the apartment in Barstow, and a truck full of research that no one wanted to read. He had stopped caring about his career, stopped caring about his reputation. The only thing that still mattered was the question that had consumed him for 3 years. What happened every 12,000 years? And when was it going to happen again? The ancient texts were full of references. The Mayans spoke of world ages that ended in cataclysm. The Hindus described yugas, vast cycles of time punctuated by destruction and renewal. The Bible spoke of floods and fire. The Egyptians recorded periods when the sky itself seemed to shift. Every culture remembered. Every tradition warned. And mainstream science pretended none of it was connected. Marcus took another sip of warm beer and watched the colors drain from the sky. Another night in the desert. Another night of questions without answers. That's when the light appeared. It came from the east, moving too slowly to be a plane, too controlled to be a meteor. A soft, blue-white glow that descended in a spiral pattern, like a leaf falling in still air. Marcus set down his beer. His heart rate quickened. 23 years of scientific training told him to look for rational explanations, but something deeper, something that had awakened during his years of forbidden research, told him this was different. The light touched down maybe half a mile away, behind a ridge of rocks that Marcus knew well. He had hiked there dozens of times, studying the geological formations, looking for evidence of past catastrophes. He should call someone. He should document this. He should do anything except what he actually did. He got in his truck and drove toward the light. The desert road was rough, barely more than a track in the sand. Marcus's truck bounced over rocks and ruts, headlights cutting through the gathering darkness. The glow ahead grew brighter as he approached. He parked at the base of the ridge and got out. The air was cooling rapidly, the way it always did in the desert after sunset. The silence was absolute. No wind, no insects. Just the crunch of his boots on gravel as he climbed toward the light. He crested the ridge and stopped. In the small valley below, something impossible waited. It wasn't a craft, or if it was unlike any technology Marcus had ever seen. A sphere of soft light, maybe 20 feet in diameter, hovering a few inches above the desert floor, and standing beside it, a figure, tall, slender, skin that seemed to shift between gray and silver in the strange illumination, and eyes. Enormous dark eyes that reflected the sphere's glow like pools of still water. Marcus's legs went weak. His scientific mind screamed that this couldn't be real, but his researcher's mind, the part that had spent 3 years chasing evidence of impossible things, felt something else entirely. Validation. "Do not be afraid, Marcus Webb." The voice appeared inside his head, calm and clear. "I have been waiting for you." Marcus tried to speak. His voice came out as a croak. He swallowed and tried again. "What are you?" "I am a keeper of cycles, a witness to ages, and I have come because you are ready to understand what your species has forgotten." The being gestured toward the desert that surrounded them. "You have spent 3 years searching for evidence of periodic catastrophe. You have found fragments, hints, pieces of a pattern that your institutions refuse to see." Marcus nodded slowly, not trusting his voice. "Tonight, I will show you the complete picture, the truth about what you call the end times, why every ancient culture remembered them, when they will come again, and what humanity must do to survive." The being extended one long hand toward Marcus. "Will you follow me?" Marcus stood on the ridge, looking down at an impossible creature offering impossible knowledge. Everything he had sacrificed, his career, his marriage, his reputation. It had all been for this question. He climbed down the ridge and took the being's hand. The desert dissolved into light. Marcus felt himself pulled through something that wasn't quite space. Colors he couldn't name washed over him. Sounds that weren't sounds vibrated through his bones. The sensation was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Then it stopped. He was standing on a platform of black stone, suspended in what appeared to be infinite darkness. But as his eyes adjusted, he realized it wasn't darkness at all. It was space. Stars surrounded him in every direction. Galaxies spiraled in the distance, and below his feet, visible through the transparent stone, a planet turned slowly. Earth, but not the Earth he knew. "Where am I?" Marcus's voice echoed strangely in the void. "You are in a place of observation." The being stood beside him, its form more clearly visible now against the backdrop of stars. "A station my kind has maintained for millennia. From here, we watch the cycles unfold." "Cycles," Marcus repeated, "the 12,000-year pattern I found in the ice cores." "Yes." The being's eyes reflected distant galaxies. "But the pattern is older and more complex than your data revealed. What you discovered was merely the most recent layer of a cycle that has repeated since your planet was young." The view shifted. Earth grew larger beneath them, filling Marcus's vision. But it was different now. The continents were in slightly different positions. Ice covered more of the surface, and scattered across the landmasses, lights glowed. Cities, This is your world 12,500 years ago. The being's voice carried weight before the last reset, when human civilization had reached heights that your current age is only beginning to approach. Marcus stared at the ancient Earth. The lights were concentrated in areas that now lay beneath oceans, coastal regions that had been swallowed when the ice melted. Atlantis, he whispered. The legends were true. Atlantis is one name. There were many civilizations, many centers of advancement, all of them destroyed in what your ancestors remembered as the Great Flood. What caused it? What happens every 12,000 years? The being raised one hand. The view shifted again. Now Marcus could see the solar system from above, planets orbiting the sun in their familiar paths, but there was something else, something he had never seen in any astronomical chart. A dark mass, barely visible against the blackness of space, moving in an elongated orbit that carried it far from the sun and then back again. Your scientists have theorized about this object. They call it Planet X, Nibiru, the Nemesis hypothesis. They approach the truth but refuse to accept it. A rogue planet? A brown dwarf? A companion to your sun, locked in a vast orbit that brings it through the inner solar system approximately every 12,000 years. The being's voice was heavy. When it passes, the gravitational effects are catastrophic. Tides surge, plates shift, the magnetic poles wander. What took millennia to build is destroyed in days. Marcus watched the dark object trace its path through the solar system, watched it pass near Earth, watched the planet convulse in response. This is what your ice cores recorded, what your sediment samples showed, what every ancient culture remembered in their myths of world-ending catastrophe. When? Marcus demanded. When does it return? The being was silent for a moment. When it spoke, its voice was gentler. The object is already affecting your planet. The increase in earthquakes, the unusual volcanic activity, the magnetic anomalies your instruments have detected. These are the early signs, the precursors that every ancient tradition described. Marcus felt ice forming in his chest. How long do we have? The passage will occur within the lifetime of children being born today, perhaps sooner. The calculations are not precise, but the window is measured in decades, not centuries. Does anyone know? Do the governments know? Some know. The being turned to face him fully. Those at the highest levels of power have known for generations. They have prepared for themselves. Underground facilities, seed vaults, continuity of government plans that your population is never told about. Marcus thought about the resistance he had encountered, the sudden loss of funding, the colleagues who turned their backs, the systematic dismissal of any research that pointed towards cyclical catastrophe. They've been suppressing the evidence, keeping people from finding out. A panicked population cannot be controlled. A population that knows the end is coming might stop participating in systems designed to benefit the few. The being's eyes met his. The suppression is not accidental. It is policy, maintained across generations, across governments, across the apparent divisions of nations and ideologies. Marcus felt rage building in his chest. All those years of research, all the evidence that had been dismissed, buried, explained away. People had a right to know, a right to prepare. Why are you telling me this? What can one person do? You can do what the powerful fear most. You can tell others. The being moved closer. The suppression works because people trust their institutions, trust their leaders, trust that if something this significant were happening, they would be told. But they won't be told. No. The powerful have already made their preparations. Their bunkers are stocked. Their escape routes are planned. When the signs become undeniable, they will disappear into their refuges, while the population they were supposed to serve is left to face the catastrophe unprepared. Marcus looked down at the earth turning beneath him. 7 billion people, going about their lives, working jobs, raising families, trusting that the future would resemble the past. There has to be something we can do, some way to survive. There is. The being's form seemed to brighten. This is why I have brought you here, not just to reveal the coming catastrophe, but to show you what your ancestors knew, how they survived the previous resets, what knowledge they preserved so that humanity could endure. "Show me," Marcus said. "Show me everything." The being raised both hands. The stars around them began to move, to rearrange themselves into patterns that seemed almost like writing. "What I'm about to reveal has been hidden for 12,000 years, preserved in symbols and myths that your species no longer understands. Tonight, you will understand. And you will carry this knowledge back to a world that desperately needs it." The patterns of stars began to tell their story, and Marcus Webb, disgraced geologist and seeker of forbidden cycles, prepared to learn how humanity could survive the end of the age. The stars rearranged themselves into a vast display. Marcus found himself looking at Earth's history laid out like a timeline, stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. Every 12,000 years. The being's voice moved through the display like a current, sometimes slightly more, sometimes slightly less, but with a regularity that cannot be coincidence. Your planet experiences a reset. Marcus watched as the timeline pulsed with markers. Each marker represented a catastrophe, a civilization falling, a world changing. The pattern you discovered in your ice cores is real, but you only saw the most recent cycles. The being gestured, and the timeline expanded further back. The cycle has repeated at least 12 times since your species achieved what you would call civilization. 12 rises, 12 falls, 12 instances of humanity climbing toward the stars, only to be cast back into darkness. "How is that possible?" Marcus asked. "We would have found evidence, artifacts, ruins." "You have found evidence." The being's eyes met his, megalithic structures around the world that your archaeology cannot explain. Artifacts demonstrating technology that shouldn't exist at the dates assigned to them. Maps showing coastlines that haven't been visible for 12,000 years. The evidence is everywhere. Your institutions simply refuse to connect it. The display shifted. Marcus saw the pyramids of Giza, Stonehenge, Göbekli Tepe, Machu Picchu, dozens of ancient sites scattered across the globe. These were not built by primitive people. They were built by survivors, inheritors of knowledge from the civilization that came before, built specifically to preserve that knowledge through the next reset. Built to survive the catastrophe? Built to encode information that would help future generations survive. The dimensions of the Great Pyramid encode the size of the Earth, the distance to the sun, the precession of the equinoxes. This is not coincidence. It is deliberate. A message carved in stone because stone endures when all else is destroyed. Marcus thought about his years studying geological formations, the strange anomalies he had encountered, the evidence of sudden violent change that official science attributed to gradual processes. What exactly happens during the passage? What does the catastrophe look like? The display shifted again. Marcus found himself watching a simulation of Earth during a reset event. What he saw made his blood run cold. The gravitational influence of the passing object destabilizes your planet's core. The being narrated as the simulation unfolded. Earthquakes strike every continent simultaneously, not ordinary earthquakes. Magnitude 12, magnitude 13. The scale your scientists use doesn't go high enough to measure them. Marcus watched cities crumble, watched the ground itself ripple like water. The magnetic poles begin to wander. Then, in some passages, they flip entirely. When this happens, the Van Allen belts that protect your planet from solar radiation temporarily collapse. The sun's energy reaches the surface unfiltered. The simulation showed fires erupting across continents, forests igniting, cities burning. The ice caps destabilize. Massive portions slide into the oceans within hours, not centuries. Sea levels rise by hundreds of feet. Coastal civilizations that took millennia to build are swallowed in a single day. Marcus watched the waters surge across landmasses, watched the lights of ancient cities disappear beneath the waves. And then there is the debris. The object does not travel alone. It carries a field of cosmic material, asteroids, meteors. When Earth passes through this field, the sky itself becomes fire. The simulation showed impacts, hundreds of them, thousands, some small, some large enough to create craters visible from space. Marcus felt physically sick. This happened before? 12 times? 12 times that we have observed, possibly more before our monitoring began. The being's voice carried no emotion. It was simply stating facts. Each time, humanity was reduced from millions to thousands. Each time, the survivors had to rebuild from almost nothing. Each time, the memory of what came before faded into myth. The flood myths, Marcus said quietly. Noah, Gilgamesh, Manu, they're all describing the same event. Different survivors, different locations, different cultural contexts. But yes, they are all remembering the last reset, the destruction of the world they knew, the few who made it through, and the long, slow process of rebuilding. The display changed. Now Marcus saw groups of survivors emerging from the catastrophe, huddled in caves, sheltered in high mountain valleys, emerging from structures that had been specifically designed to protect them. Not everyone perished. The being gestured at the scattered groups. Those who knew it was coming prepared. Those who understood the signs moved to safe locations. Those who preserved knowledge passed it to the next generation. This is how your species has survived. This is how it will survive again. But how? How do you survive something like that? The being turned to face him fully. There are 3 elements: physical preparation, geographic positioning, and consciousness. Consciousness? The display shifted to show something different, not physical events, but something subtler. Energy patterns flowing through human forms, states of awareness that Marcus had never seen depicted. Your species is more than physical bodies. You carry an energetic component that most humans have forgotten how to access. During the catastrophe, those whose consciousness is awakened have an advantage. They perceive dangers before they manifest. They make decisions that seem illogical but prove to be life-saving. They find each other and form communities of survival. That sounds like mysticism. It sounds like mysticism because your materialist science has no framework for it, but the ancient traditions understood. The meditation practices, the energy work, the disciplines of consciousness. They were not merely spiritual exercises. They were survival training, preparation for the time when intuition and perception would mean the difference between life and death. Marcus thought about the texts he had studied, the ancient traditions that spoke of inner development, the practices that mainstream science dismissed as superstition. What about physical preparation? Geographic positioning? The display shifted again. Now it showed a map of the world with certain areas highlighted. The safest locations are inland, at moderate elevation, away from fault lines and volcanic zones. The being indicated regions that glowed with soft light. Some of your ancestors encoded this knowledge in their migrations. Why do you think ancient peoples moved to specific mountain valleys? Why certain plateaus have been continuously inhabited for 12,000 years, while coastal regions show repeated destruction and rebuilding? Marcus recognized some of the highlighted areas, regions where indigenous peoples had maintained continuous cultures for millennia, places that modern development had largely bypassed. Those who knew have always known where to go. The knowledge was passed down in stories, in traditions, in the inexplicable pull that some feel toward certain lands. The being paused, the instinct that drew you to the desert, the sense that you needed to be here, in this place, at this time. That was not random. Marcus felt something shift inside him, his obsession with the cycles, his willingness to sacrifice everything for the truth. His retreat to the desert when his life fell apart, was all of it guidance? Preparation? Physical preparation, he said. What do people need? The basics of survival are not complex. Clean water, stored food, seeds for replanting, tools that do not depend on electricity, medical supplies. The being's voice became more practical. Your ancestors survived with far less than modern humans have access to. The key is preparation before the infrastructure collapses. Once the supermarkets are empty and the power grid fails, it will be too late to begin. How long would supplies need to last? The acute phase lasts between 2 and 5 years, depending on the severity of the passage. After that, those who survive can begin to rebuild. Agriculture becomes possible again once the dust settles and the climate stabilizes. But the first years are the most dangerous. Starvation, disease, and conflict between survivors competing for scarce resources. Marcus thought about the world he knew. 7 billion people dependent on systems that could fail in an instant. Supply chains that crossed oceans. Just-in-time delivery that left only days of food in any given city. Most people won't survive. The being was silent for a moment. Most people will not survive. This is the truth that the powerful have hidden. This is why they suppress the evidence and silence researchers like yourself. A population that knows cannot be controlled in the final years. People would leave the cities, stop participating in the economic systems, begin preparing in ways that would disrupt the status quo. So they keep people ignorant, keep them consuming, keep them believing the future will look like the past. Until the very end, when the signs become undeniable, when the earthquakes intensify and the magnetic field weakens and the sky fills with fire, then the powerful will retreat to their bunkers. And the billions who were never told will face the catastrophe with no preparation and no warning. Marcus felt rage burning in his chest. All his years of research, all the evidence he had gathered. It wasn't just being suppressed to protect scientific paradigms, it was being suppressed to protect power structures that depended on public ignorance. The underground bunkers, the seed vaults, the continuity of government facilities, they're not for general emergencies. They are for this, the being confirmed. Built over decades using public funds, justified with cover stories about nuclear war and pandemic response. But their true purpose has always been to preserve the elite through the reset while the general population is left to die. The display shifted again. Marcus saw networks of tunnels and facilities buried deep underground. Seen from above, they formed a web that connected across continents. Some locations he recognized from conspiracy theories he had once dismissed. How do we fight this? How do we get the truth out? You cannot fight it through institutions. The institutions are controlled. You cannot fight it through media. The media is managed. You can only fight it the way truth has always spread during times of suppression, person to person, community to community. Those who are ready to hear will hear. Those who are not will dismiss you as they dismissed you before. That's not enough. There are billions of people. Not everyone can be saved. The being's voice was gentle but firm. This is the hardest truth. The carrying capacity of a post-reset world is measured in millions, not billions. The systems that support 7 billion people will not exist. Those who survive will be those who prepared, those who had skills, those who formed communities, those who understood that the age was ending. Marcus stared at the display. The weight of what he was learning pressed down on him like a physical force. The ancient traditions, the indigenous peoples, they've known all along. Some have preserved the knowledge more completely than others. The being gestured, and the display showed various indigenous cultures, ceremonies, traditions, oral histories. The stories that academics dismiss as mythology often contain encoded survival information: where to go, when to move, what signs to watch for. The people who maintained their traditional ways are better prepared than those who have fully assimilated into modern civilization. Marcus thought about the Native American prophecies he had encountered in his research, the Hopi, the Maya, traditions that spoke of world ages ending in catastrophe, prophecies that described the very signs he had been tracking. The prophecies aren't predictions, they're memories. Memories and warnings passed down from survivors of the last reset, encoded in forms that would survive 12,000 years of cultural change. The being's eyes seemed to pulse with inner light. The Hopi speak of the blue star. The Maya spoke of the end of the age. The Hindu texts describe the dissolution of the Kali Yuga. They are all pointing to the same event, the same cycle, the same opportunity. Opportunity! The catastrophe is not just destruction, it is transformation. The being moved closer to Marcus. Every reset has been followed by a flowering. Survivors who made it through carried knowledge and wisdom that elevated the next cycle. The trauma of the experience opens consciousness in ways that ordinary life does not. Those who survive will be different, more aware, more connected, more capable of building something better than what came before. The display shifted one final time. Now Marcus saw not destruction, but renewal. Survivors emerging into a changed world, communities forming, knowledge being shared. The first tentative steps of the next civilization. This is why the knowledge matters, not just to survive, to thrive afterward, to build the next cycle on wisdom rather than ignorance, to break the pattern of forgetting that has kept your species trapped in the same loop for hundreds of thousands of years. Break the pattern? In previous resets, the survivors were too traumatized to preserve complete records. Knowledge was lost, wisdom was fragmented. Each new civilization had to rediscover what the previous one had known. But this time can be different. This time, there are those who understand the cycle before it happens, who can prepare not just to survive, but to preserve, who can ensure that the next humanity begins with knowledge rather than starting from scratch. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. The despair that had gripped him was giving way to something else. Purpose. That's why you're telling me this, not just to save myself, to preserve knowledge. You have spent 30 years studying the Earth. You understand cycles in a way that few humans do. The being extended one hand toward him. The information you have gathered, combined with what I am showing you tonight, forms a body of knowledge that could guide survivors for generations. But how do I share it? No one believed me before. The world is changing. The being's voice carried certainty. The signs are becoming harder to suppress. More people are feeling the wrongness, sensing that something is coming. 3 years ago, they would not have listened. Now some will. And in the years ahead, more and more will be ready to hear. Marcus looked at the Earth, turning slowly in the display, his planet, his species, facing a catastrophe that most would never see coming. What about the timing? How long exactly do we have? The being was silent for a long moment. The object is difficult to track. Its orbit takes it through regions where observation is limited, but based on the effects we are already seeing, based on the acceleration of seismic activity and magnetic field changes, the passage is likely within the next 15 to 20 years, possibly sooner if the orbital calculations are imprecise. 20 years, maybe less. Marcus felt the weight of that timeline settle into his bones. This is why there is urgency. The being's form began to shift, becoming less solid. The time for preparation is now. Every year that passes is a year lost. Every person who awakens to the truth is a potential survivor. Every community that forms is a seed of the next civilization. Wait, Marcus said, I have more questions. How do I know what to do? How do I find others who understand? The knowledge I have given you tonight is enough to begin. The being's voice was fading. You will know what to do because you have always known. The obsession that drove you, the sacrifice you were willing to make, it was preparation for this moment. Will I see you again? If you need guidance, go to the desert. Still your mind. Ask. We are always watching, always available to those who have opened themselves to truth. The display began to dissolve. The stars started to fade. Marcus felt himself being pulled back toward ordinary reality. One more thing. The being's voice was barely a whisper now. The end times are not punishment. They are not judgment. They are simply the turning of a wheel, a natural process. Do not approach what is coming with fear. Approach it with preparation, with purpose, with the understanding that every ending is also a beginning. The observation platform dissolved completely. Marcus opened his eyes. He was lying on his back in the desert, staring up at stars that now seemed to carry meaning they hadn't held before. His truck was nearby. The sphere of light was gone, but everything had changed. He sat up slowly. His body felt different, heavier and lighter at the same time. The knowledge the being had given him was settling into his consciousness, rearranging his understanding of everything. He knew now why his research had been suppressed, why his career had been destroyed, why his marriage had ended. He had been prepared for this moment his entire life. Marcus stood up and walked to his truck. The desert was silent around him. The stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance. Somewhere out there, the dark companion was approaching. The cycle was turning. The end of the age was coming, and Marcus Webb had work to do. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He drove back to his apartment in Barstow and began writing. Everything he had seen, everything he had learned, the cycles, the catastrophe, the survival knowledge, the consciousness component that mainstream science refused to acknowledge. By dawn, he had filled 40 pages. By noon, 100. The words poured out of him as if something had been uncorked, a lifetime of questions finally meeting their answers. He didn't try to publish through academic channels. Those doors had closed 3 years ago and wouldn't reopen for what he had to share. Instead, he created a website. Simple, direct. No credentials listed, no appeals to authority, just the information. He called it the Cycle Watchers. The first month he had 17 visitors, mostly bots, a few curiosity seekers who left mocking comments about doomsday preppers and conspiracy theorists. Marcus didn't care. He kept writing, kept adding evidence, the ice core data he had gathered before his funding was cut, the geological anomalies that pointed to sudden catastrophic change, the correlations between ancient myths and physical evidence, the timeline of signs that the being had shown him. In the second month, something shifted. His site was linked by a forum discussing alternative history. Traffic jumped to several hundred visitors per day. Comments started appearing from people who had noticed the same patterns, researchers who had been silenced, scientists who had asked the wrong questions, ordinary people who felt in their bones that something was coming. One email changed everything. It was from a woman named Rachel, a former emergency management specialist who had worked for FEMA for 15 years. She had stumbled across Marcuse's site while researching something else entirely, and what she read had kept her awake for 3 nights. "I've seen the bunkers," she wrote. "I've seen the classified continuity plans. Everything you're describing matches what I observed, but could never explain. They're preparing for something they're not telling the public. I thought I was the only one who noticed. Now I know I'm not." Marcus wrote back. They talked on the phone for 6 hours. Rachel had pieces of the puzzle that Marcus lacked: insider knowledge about government preparations, details about the underground facilities and their true purpose, information about the timeline that matched what the being had shown him. She became his first ally, but not his last. Within 6 months, the Cycle Watchers had grown into a network: geologists, climatologists, indigenous elders who recognized the signs their ancestors had warned about, preppers who had been dismissed as paranoid, but who understood survival in ways that academics did not. Each person brought pieces. Together, they assembled a picture more complete than any individual could hold. Marcus left Barstow. There was nothing holding him there anymore. He bought land in a mountain valley in Colorado, a region the being had highlighted as relatively safe during the passage. Using the last of his savings and a small inheritance he had been holding on to, he built a homestead. Solar panels, a well, greenhouses, storage for supplies. It wasn't a bunker. It was a teaching center. People started coming. At first, just a few, the most dedicated members of the network who wanted to learn practical skills. Marcus taught them what he knew about geology, about reading the land, about finding water and stable ground. Rachel taught emergency preparedness and community organization. An indigenous elder named Joseph, whose grandfather had been a keeper of traditional knowledge, taught practices for developing intuition and consciousness. The courses were never advertised. Word spread through the network, through whispered conversations, through the inexplicable pull that the being had described, drawing together those who were ready. 1 year after the encounter in the desert, Marcus stood before a gathering of 60 people in the meadow below his homestead. They had come from across the country, from Canada, from Mexico. Some had given up careers, others had sold homes. All of them had felt the call that Marcus recognized from his own experience. "What I'm about to tell you is not easy to hear," Marcus began. "The world as we know it is ending, not in some distant future, within our lifetimes, probably within the next 2 decades. He had expected panic. What he got was nods, tears of relief, the validation of suspicions that had haunted them for years. But this is not a message of despair. Our ancestors survived what is coming multiple times. They left us instructions encoded in monuments, in myths, in traditions that we've been taught to dismiss as superstition. We are here to recover that knowledge, to prepare, and to ensure that when the cycle turns, some of us are ready to build what comes next." The gathering lasted a week. Marcus and his team taught practical skills: water purification, food preservation, seed saving, basic medicine. But they also taught the consciousness practices that Joseph and others had preserved: meditation techniques, energy work, methods for developing the intuition that could mean the difference between life and death when the infrastructure collapsed. On the final night, Marcus sat with a small group around a fire. The stars wheeled overhead, the same stars that had rearranged themselves in that observation platform to tell him the truth about Earth's cycles. "I lost everything to find this," Marcus said quietly. "My career, my marriage, my reputation. 3 years ago, I thought my life was over. I thought I had sacrificed everything for nothing. He looked around at the faces illuminated by firelight, seekers, survivors to be, the seeds of the next civilization. Now I understand. It wasn't sacrifice. It was preparation. Everything that was taken from me had to go, so I would be ready for what needed to come through me, for what needed to reach all of you. A young woman named Sarah spoke up. She was a former software engineer who had walked away from a 6-figure salary after experiencing dreams that showed her the catastrophe. How do we know we're not just creating another doomsday cult? How do we know any of this is real? Marcus smiled. He had asked himself the same question 1,000 times. You don't know. Not with certainty. But ask yourself this. Does preparing for disruption harm you if nothing happens? Learning to grow food, building community, developing self-reliance. These things make your life better, regardless of whether the cycle turns in our lifetime or not. He paused, looking up at the stars. But also pay attention to the signs. The earthquake activity increasing every year. The magnetic field weakening faster than any model predicted. The solar anomalies that scientists can't explain. The feeling in your gut that brought you here despite every rational objection. The evidence is mounting. Those who have eyes to see can see it. The network continued to grow. Not exponentially, not virally, but steadily. Person by person. Community by community. Small groups forming in mountain valleys and rural areas. Urban clusters learning skills and making plans to relocate when the signs intensified. 2 years after the encounter, Marcus received a visit that surprised him. A black SUV pulled up to his homestead. 2 men in suits got out. Government, Marcus assumed, finally coming to silence him the way they had silenced his research. But the man who approached him wasn't hostile. He was tired, haunted, a bureaucrat who had spent 30 years serving a system he had finally realized was rotten. I know who you are, the man said. I've read your website. I've seen your research from before they shut you down. Are you here to threaten me? I'm here to join you. The man's voice cracked. I've spent my career in classified programs. I've seen the preparations they're making, and I've seen who's included in the survival plans. He paused. My family isn't on the list. Neither is anyone else's. The bunkers are for the elite. The rest of us are considered acceptable losses. The man became one of Marcus's most valuable sources. Through him, the network gained access to information that confirmed everything the being had shown. The timeline, the preparations, the absolute contempt that those in power held for the populations they pretended to serve. 3 years after the desert, Marcus stood on a ridge overlooking the valley where his community had grown. 100 people now lived there year-round. Greenhouses produced food. Children learned skills that their parents' generation had forgotten. A library preserved essential knowledge in forms that would survive the loss of electricity. It wasn't enough. 100 people couldn't save humanity, but they could plant seeds. The being had told him that not everyone could be saved, that the carrying capacity of a post-reset world was measured in millions, not billions. This had seemed like despair at first. Now Marcus understood it differently. His job wasn't to save everyone. His job was to ensure that some survived, that knowledge was preserved, that the next cycle of humanity would begin with wisdom rather than ignorance. Around the world, similar communities were forming. The network had spread to 6 continents. Indigenous groups were reconnecting with traditional knowledge. Scientists who had been silenced were finding each other. The seeds of survival were being planted in 1,000 locations. Marcus felt the familiar warmth in his chest that sometimes came when he was still, the presence he had learned to recognize. You have done well. The voice was faint but clear. The preparation continues, the seeds are planted. When the cycle turns, some will bloom. Is it enough? Marcus asked the empty air. It is what can be done, and it is more than has been done before, because of you, because of those you have awakened. The next cycle will be different, better. A step forward rather than another repetition of the same mistakes. Marcus looked out at the valley, at the community he had helped build, at the people who were preparing not just to survive, but to carry human knowledge forward through the darkness. The end times were coming. Nothing could stop that. But what came after was not yet written, and Marcus Webb, geologist, teacher, keeper of cycles, intended to help write it. Marcus Webb spent 23 years studying the Earth's history. He found patterns in ice cores and sediment samples that his colleagues refused to see. Every 12,000 years, catastrophic reset. Civilizations erased, humanity starting over from almost nothing. His research destroyed his career. His questions ended his marriage. His persistence made him an outcast from the scientific community that once respected him. One encounter in the Mojave Desert showed him why. The end times are not mythology. They are not religious metaphor. They are a cycle, a natural process that has repeated at least 12 times since humanity first achieved civilization. And the next turning of the wheel is approaching. The governments know. The elites have prepared. Underground bunkers stocked with supplies, seed vaults preserving genetic material, continuity plans that include only those at the very top of the power structure. The rest of humanity has been kept ignorant because a population that knows what's coming cannot be controlled, cannot be kept working jobs that won't matter, cannot be kept consuming products that won't last, cannot be kept passive while those in power secure their own survival. But the knowledge has not been completely lost. The ancient cultures remembered, the pyramids, the myths, the prophecies that every tradition preserved. They are not primitive superstition, they are survival instructions, encoded by ancestors who lived through the last reset and wanted to help their descendants survive the next. You felt something while listening to this story, a recognition, a resonance with warnings you've sensed your whole life but couldn't articulate. The earthquakes increasing, the weather destabilizing, the magnetic field weakening, the feeling in your gut that something is coming. That feeling is not paranoia, it is ancient memory awakening. You have a choice now. You can dismiss this as another doomsday prediction and return to your normal life, or you can begin to prepare, not in fear, in purpose, learning skills your grandparents knew, but your generation forgot, building community with others who understand, developing the consciousness and intuition that your ancestors used to survive what is coming. The cycle is turning. The signs are multiplying. The time for preparation is now. If this story awakens something in you, leave a comment. Share what you've sensed. Share what you've seen. Because every person who wakes up weakens the suppression that has kept humanity blind. And if you want more revelations about what has been hidden, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. The end times are not punishment, they are a cycle, and those who prepare can survive to build what comes next.